Welcome to TNW Studio. I'm very happy to have Shermin Voshmgir with us tonight or today, Director of Cryptoeconomics Research Lab at Vienna University of Economics and founder of Blockchain Hub in Berlin.
Yes.
She's also an author of the book Token Economy. I would really recommend you to check it out. And in the past, she was also curator of the DAO, quite famous project on blockchain space if you follow, an advisor of Wonder and the Estonian e-residency program as well.
Yes.
Very welcome to Amsterdam, and I would like to start talking about probably your involvement as a researcher in the cryptoeconomic space.
Yes.
And also like how research can benefit in general the blockchain technology and so on.
Okay, so actually my involvement in research is quite recent, because when I started out with blockchain, that was 5 years ago, I was in Berlin and found that technology, or somebody told me, actually a friend of a friend from Amsterdam. And so that's quite funny. And he was in Berlin, and I asked him, what do you do? And then he said something blockchain. And I'm like, what is blockchain? And then he said something Bitcoin, technology Bitcoin. And I remember the next day waking up and I remember that it was meaningful, but I didn't remember why, and then I didn't remember the word, because how do you remember blockchain, right? It's not a word you remember, but I did remember something technology in Bitcoin. And I started Googling, and I realized that, wow, that's interesting. I didn't at all grasp the full depth of it and why, but I got this gut feeling that, wow, this is a governance technology. It's something that could resolve a lot of the socioeconomic questions around not only the internet, but also global interaction. But I didn't know why. And what I started back then in Berlin was kind of what we called the Blockchain Hub, which in the beginning was just a website giving information on blockchain. Back then, mind you, 5 years ago, there was no single source of information on blockchain. There were a few videos on YouTube and on GitHub and etc., but there was no online resource. So we were the first online resource, and very soon we started with community activities also, and a lot of not only meetups, but more than meetups, because other people were doing meetups. We did these working groups around specific questions: blockchain and law, blockchain and identity, blockchain and, for example, the aerospace industry, etc., etc. So we try to have this research mind to what does that mean, right? But most of us were not researchers. Most of us were practitioners. The people who were in the working groups, they were lawyers and software developers. They didn't have time to really deep dive into the research. They were more, So when we started in Vienna, last year in Vienna, I started, I'm the director of this research institute, Cryptoeconomics, and it was newly founded, and I was invited to be the director to start a research-oriented, with researchers, only do research on those interdisciplinary topics. And the question is, how does these cryptoeconomics, the mechanisms behind what drives this decentralized networks by these, what I call purpose-driven token, what does it, how can we achieve it in a better way, but also what does it mean? Because crypto and blockchain and this the revolution it sparked, and this token economy is more a socio-economic revolution rather than a technological revolution.
Exactly. What's interesting about blockchain, that there is a lot of like social aspect to that, and I guess that's what got you interested, because it's kind of encrypted in the logic of the technology.
Well, let's frame it like this. How to write the code is a technological question. What to write in the code is a socioeconomic question, right?
Exactly.
And I think this is what we need to understand. So technology sets the boundaries of what I write into a smart contract, how I design a token contract, right? The technology just sets the boundary of what is possible. Like technology would define which distributed ledger this runs on, or whether it's interoperable with another distributed ledger or not, right? And how many lines of code, or which programming language, etc., you need. Technology does not answer the question of what the governance rules is. Do you want plutocracy or democracy, right? Do you want, how do you want to design a token? Should it be tied to your identity? Should it be fungible? Can you transfer it at any time to anyone? Should it have limited transferability? Should it maybe expire after a while or live forever, right? All these things, it's like programmable money. And how we design this money all of a sudden becomes like an experimental thing. It's like playing Lego. Like what type of, how do I want to do this? So it's socioeconomic, and this is why we did the Research Institute, because in the end, blockchain is everything you don't know about economics, money, and technology combined, right? And it touches so many different areas of research and real life. And this is why we need to combine the deep knowledge of research, but transfer it into startups.
Do you have any research agenda running at the moment in these?
We are actually, that's a very good question. We are actually defining a research agenda. And we have a first draft. And basically we say that there are two types of token systems, simple token systems and complex token systems. Simple token systems are what we already know, asset tokens, access right tokens, bonus points, downloads of a song or streams of a song, or a token that represents a currency or a commodity or a share in a company, etc., etc. This is the token in these cases is just a cryptographic derivative. It's just a new form to represent real life assets and access rights, but derivatives are not a new thing.
Yeah.
It's just a new type of derivative that is managed by a collective, by a distributed ledger that is either a closed system or it's an open system, but it's collectively managed. And these token systems we understand because the logic, the business logic or the governance logic of these types of tokens is nothing new. It's just the derivative is new. So tokenizing it would mean or require mainly legal engineering, understanding how we can make it, kind of regulatory compliant, because it's based on a new technology. But the business model itself will not change too much. Sometimes yes, like fractional ownership becomes more possible, etc. But the really interesting part are the what I call complex or the purpose-driven tokens that enable complex systems, because the Bitcoin network or any other public blockchain network is a complex network. It's a complex system. It represents a dynamic network of actors who do not know and trust each other, who don't live in the same country, who don't speak the same language, who don't have legal contracts with each other, but they're controlled by we steer the action of all network actors through a token that acts as an incentive to the individual to contribute to a collective goal. And this is a very new way of value creation, but it's not really completely new. We can learn a lot from microeconomics and macroeconomics, because this is how also nation states are also steered through mechanisms that they're not steered the same way like a company is steered top down. They're steered through intensive mechanisms, and they try to steer an autonomous group of people, right? So what we're seeing here is that this new token economy, where we have these complex networks that are purpose-driven, they need new tools. And these tools are microeconomics and macroeconomics tools that policymakers use to steer national economies. We don't need the tools of marketing and personnel management, the business administration tools so much. They will also be required, but on a more granular or a higher level. But on the protocol level, we need nation-state tools, monetary policy, etc. And I think this is a shift. And this is why academia is so important, because most people in business are not microeconomists or macroeconomists or network theorists, right?
Exactly. Yeah. So do you think that, in a way, token-driven communities are grassroots movements if we kind of copy the model how the national state operates?
Yes, because the Bitcoin protocol is open source, so anyone could take it over time and create their own modify this open source code and create their own fork of this, their own version of this network, which happened over time. And you can think of these networks as kind of like distributed internet tribes with one purpose. Yeah, and the purpose of the Bitcoin network is to facilitate peer-to-peer payments, but the purpose of the Ethereum network is to facilitate peer-to-peer computing. Yeah, the purpose maybe of the Steemit network is to facilitate peer-to-peer, or the application on top is to facilitate peer-to-peer social media and incentivize your contributions with a token. So yes, it's like distributed internet tribes, but the cool thing is you can be part of many distributed internet tribes.
Exactly.
You're not born into a tribe, right?
Yes. Yeah.
And as opposed to the Web 2, where this tribe, like also you could think of Twitter as a distributed internet tribe, but it has a dictatorship, right? Because the company running Twitter is the central governor. Is the dictator saying like, these are the rules of the game, that's how we do it, suck it up or leave it, you know? And because of network effects, actually leaving the network is hard. I've tried to leave Facebook a few times, but because of all the people in my network, and because of, for a while actually, I didn't leave Facebook because it had very good these event functions. For a very long time, I didn't leave Facebook just for the events, because people kept inviting me for events on Facebook, right?
Yes.
And then for another reason. But basically, yes, it's in nation states we're born into it, so we're coerced to stay in the country and live in the country where we're born into, and it's really hard to switch countries. Europe is a bit of an exception, but if you want to migrate outside of Europe, you actually have to go through a quite difficult process, right? And with companies, it's a bit different. I can be part of this company. So with companies, we have a free market of companies we would, as a maybe employer, work for, or as a consumer, consume their products. There we have the free market system. In nation states, we don't have a free market system. We are kind of born into a nation state, and with these blockchain networks, so these purpose-driven networks, even if they happen on the application level, we all of a sudden come into, I would say, this competition of purpose-driven networks, maybe competition of currency. Everyone can create their own purpose-driven currency, and the question is someone interested to be part of my network? But we have new means to organize ourselves.
Exactly, but that's a very interesting example that you stated with Facebook.
Yes.
And then if we also connect it with purpose-driven systems competing with each other, because we are all very different, right?
Yeah.
You have very different motivations to be in this kind of systems. Like someone has like different features of Facebook, different features of Twitter, have more followers, for example, on Twitter, or just it's part of their psychology to express themselves, like in the format that Twitter suggests. Won't there be a situation when those purpose-driven systems will be too fragmented or too segmented? Because like it'll be like two people that just don't like the other system for a particular reason, and then there'll be again like bubbles in a way.
Yes, this is a very interesting ethnological question or sociological question. Network theory actually looks at that. We have a whole line of economics or mathematics that has always studied networks, but in a mathematical way, or in a theoretical way. But ever since social media, people who studied network theory have something real to work on. Not that they didn't before. There were also fields of applications for network theorists before, but maybe more tangible for day-to-day, for everyone, right? And so there is a whole line of science in network. Network theorists can analyze network dynamics and formalize it also in a mathematical way, predict it through graph theory. So we actually have these tools, but in startups, most people don't know it. And I think one important thing I would like to say, this new internet, or this kind of new web, let's say, the internet is the same, but this Web 3, what many people call the Web 3, is very different to the web and the Web 1 and the Web 2, because in the 90s, when we created the first websites, there were mostly search engines or simple websites that replicated kind of the logic of a analog company into a centralized platform. Then we had new phenomena like a Wikipedia, and so it started decentralizing, but still kind of the tools. So the tools with which we built these websites were very kind of what we learned in business administration, right? It's very, but the tools we need in this network economy, we already saw it with the Web 2, to understand the phenomenology of Facebook and Twitter and how news and fake news spreads. You need new kind of tools to understand it. Network theory, graph theory, macroeconomics. These are the things you need to know today to be fit for the Web 3. Whereas in the 90s, you needed to have other know-how, right? And also one other thing is like, maybe like the way we were creating these websites, they were not as mission critical as these networks. I mean, obviously you didn't want to have a website shut down and a DDoS attack, and you were trying to keep your services up. But if your services were down, maybe the company lost money, but most people maybe didn't lose money. These decentralized, these purpose-driven networks, they all come with an economic incentive layer. There's so many stakeholders in the network. If something goes wrong, and we've seen it,
affect many stakeholders.
200 million are gone, right? Or 50 million, as in the case of the DAO, or 200 million plus, as in the case of some multisig problems with the Ethereum multisigs. Investors lost hundreds of millions of dollars and or euros, and because these systems were not designed in the safety critical and mission critical way. So we also need to apply some more rigorous engineering ethics or economic ethics. The word ethic, I'm sorry, it's maybe people didn't use it in the early days of the internet, but we need to understand the ethics, and this is not a new thing. There is a line of engineering ethics. Every engineer learns that if you build a bridge, you cannot just build a bridge and optimize. You have this whole engineering ethics to make it mission and safety critical when you build this. And I think we have to start applying this to building these networks also.
And probably also risk management. Because there are definitely risks when you build this kind of multi-stakeholder systems and like complicated networks. That was also probably the example that you gave in your talk with Steemit and like other great ideas that were just lacking understanding of the design, all the elements, all the risks that can be there. So what would be, I don't know, the recipe if you, for example, there are some developers listening to us or some startuppers that would like to design also a token like with purpose, purpose-driven tokens systems, and what's the best way to do it? Well, it's not only the idea, right?
Yes, I mean, I think we're at the very beginning of this stage of defining kind of tools and steps for what we call token engineering, but we don't refer. The engineering really doesn't refer to the technical programming of it, but more to the design thinking of it. Let's say design thinking, and. The first question you have to ask yourself, what is the purpose of my network? Because if the purpose is to have to a universal state layer like Bitcoin or Ethereum, that's a different purpose than if you want to have a resilient social network without fake news. If you want to eradicate fake news, you need some decentralized reputation systems. Your mechanism will need to incentivize some decentralized reputation systems that are and really that's the holy grail of decentralization, is to kind of how can we decentralize the role of the editor, because in the end fake news is also a result of we got rid of the editor and nobody did any quality management. We can tokenize this through reputation tokens, but we don't have the solution for it yet. So that will be a whole area of kind of networks coming and trying it out, and we can research this also. I think this is an area where research and startups or these those who implement these networks, they have to work together. So basically you first ask yourself, what's the purpose of my network? Then you derive the functions of your token from the purpose. Like, is it fungible? Is it non-fungible? Is it like tied to my identity? Is it transferable or not? Does it expire or not, etc. So you design your token, you make based on some assumptions. Ideally, you model this under a complex network perspective, which is not like quick and dirty. Then you run it through a simulator, and then you check whether your assumptions really are true, and then you go back to the design board and you maybe tweak some parameters of your token, and then you simulate it again. Thing is, we lack simulation tools, and the first ones are being built now, like simulation tools where you can just simulate an economy to see if your assumptions were correct.
Is there any name of those?
Yeah, for example, one of the researchers working for us, Michael Zarkem for Block Science, and he's collaborating with our research lab also. He has built CatCat, which is such a simulation tool and has recently also gone open source. So luckily, and he is at the forefront of that, these things are being done now. And as we have more of these tools, we will be able to better learn and plan and kind of model these things before we deploy them. Because especially these decentralized networks driven by a purpose-driven token, it's kind of an unstoppable or hard to stop machine. Once a bias is in the protocol, it's hard to get it out of the protocol, because then you need a majority consensus of the network, and we have seen that democracy is slow. I mean, that's not, and we've seen it in Bitcoin, we see it in Ethereum, and so I think we need to be much more careful before we deploy a protocol, how we design it.
And as we have to wrap up, just final conclusions. Where do you see the place of the token economy? Is it going to be an alternative, or is it going to take over?
That's a very good question. So, I personally think that eventually, my personal prediction is eventually we will tokenize any socioeconomic activity. We can already see we're already tokenizing securities. We're already tokenizing CO2 emission reduction. We're already tokenizing attention or contributions to social media, and that's only the beginning, So I think eventually we will tokenize everything, and the big question is, which means that our economic activities will become super measurable. It raises a fundamental question around data privacy. It raises a fundamental question around governance and steering. It allows us, having a data-driven economy would also mean that we have immediate feedback. We can build immediate feedback loops in the steering of those economies. And if we combine this with AI, maybe we will have more intelligent, more in a sophisticated, let's say, governance tools for our global society. But I'm quite sure we will tokenize pretty much everything in the future. But it will take another years. And to have a full-blown token economy, we need multi-token capable wallets where I can have hundreds of different tokens. We don't have it now. We need atomic swapping possibilities. And then we probably will enter a digital barter economy, where I can trade my Apple tokens for your peer tokens if they're fungible.
Yes.
And some algorithms will determine the price. And then the question is, what is the role of money in the future?
Exactly.
Yeah.
And if you want to learn more about the future, definitely get a copy of the book,
Thank
Token
you.
Economy. Thank you so much, Shermin, for a
Thank
very
you.
insightful interview.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.